So we're continuing in Isaiah today, and we're looking at this powerful message of the Lord to Jerusalem and to Judah. Remember, and let's face it, we talk about these readings, and the readings are in a 3-year cycle. So every 3 years, you're going to come through the same reading. So one of the rules I have in my homilies, is I don't repeat what I've said before, except for certain exceptions. For example, I'll often repeat the homily I've done for years on Epiphany. But generally, every Sunday, even though I'm looking at a 3-year cycle, so every 3 years, and I know priests that do this, every 3 years, I just repeat the same cycle, the same homily. I don't do that. There are priests that do that. I don't do that. I start with a new homily every single Sunday, with as I said, a few exceptions. Well, so when we do the every 3 years, well, we've been doing this for, let's see, this is 2016, so I've probably been doing this for about 7 years. So we've gone through the cycle twice. And then the daily cycle is only 2 years. So I've gone through this cycle probably close to 4 times. But you look at it anew every single time. So we talked about last week, but we've talked about before how you have the situation where Israel does not respond to the Lord no matter how many times he calls out. And then you have a situation where you have to cut off the limb to save the tree. Kind of look at it this way, maybe a better way to look at it, since I work in a hospital. You have certain diseases that do not respond to treatment, and you do all the treatment you can. Say, for example, you have some kind of bacterial infection on the foot. I hate to put it this way, but this is the best way I can describe. All right, I'll change it a bit. A very serious infection on a tree limb, make it a little bit less gross. So on a tree limb. And so this infection, you've done everything to kind of fix this infection. It doesn't work. So the only thing you can do to save the tree is to remove that tree limb. And that's what God does to Israel and the ancient Israel. He removes the limb to save the tree. Well, the disease, in a sense, has already gone to Jerusalem. However, by informing Jerusalem and Judah, rather, and Jerusalem is the capital city of Judah at the time. You see what happened to Assyria. This is what's going to happen to you unless you change your ways, and that led people to change their ways. That's why Judah existed all the way up until the Romans destroyed the temple. Judah existed all the way up until Masada, and then it ceased to exist, and then Israel returned in existence in 1948. Remember, as I've said before, it is so fascinating to understand this within the concept of time. This is just so fascinating. So all of this plays itself out. Well, what reading do we see today? We're continuing in Isaiah. We're actually in the 10th chapter of Isaiah, and we have the Lord saying through Isaiah to Jerusalem, basically, you see what I did to Israel. You too have to change your ways, and when you do, then I will protect you. So let's look at what's being said here. Woe to Assur, he is the rod in the staff of my fury and my indignation in their hands. I will send him to a deceitful nation, and I will order him against the fury of my people, so that he may take away the plunder and tear apart the prey, and place it to be trampled like the mud of the streets. But he will not consider it to be so, and his heart will not suppose it to be this way. Instead, his heart will be set out to crush and to exterminate more than a few nations. For he will say, are not my princes like many kings? Is not Carmel like Carchemish? And Hamath like Arpad? Is not Samaria like Damascus? In the same manner as my hand reached the kingdoms of the idol, so also will I reach the false images of those of Jerusalem and Samaria. See, remember what I always say. The worst sin in the Bible is idolatry. And remember, in Judah, in Israel, they were practicing idolatry. They wouldn't turn away. In Judah, they're practicing idolatry, and the Lord is saying, I'm going to destroy these idols, and calling the people to change their ways, which ultimately they do. So it's an important message here, but what he's reaching out. And why is idolatry a problem? Idolatry is a problem because what idolatry does is you start to worship yourself because you project on this other God that you would want. And that's what happens. And then you become a slave to that God. A great book to read that really highlights this is Something Wicked This Way Comes. If you've never read it, it's by Ray Bradbury. It comes from the 1940s or 50s, but the story is great. And it's based on how desires make you enslaved. If you want to see the movie's excellent too. I've told you about the movie. The movie is the reason why we have Touchstone Pictures, because it's a horror movie, and people could not understand a Disney horror movie, and so they realized they need another brand. For he said, I have acted with the strength of my own hand, and I have understood with my own wisdom, and I have removed the limits of the people, and I have plundered their leaders. Okay? And like one with power, I have pulled down those residing on high. And my hand has reached to the strength of the people as to a nest. And just as the eggs which have been left behind are gathered, so here I gather the entire earth, and there was no one who moved a wing or opened a mouth or uttered a snarl. Should the axe glorify itself over him who wields it? Or can the saw exalt itself over him who pulls it? How can a rod lift up against him who wields it, or a staff exalt itself, though it is only wood? This is what the Lord is saying. I am the power. Respond to me, obey me, because there is no other way. And the Lord is speaking in wisdom. That's the thing. You probably got caught up in listening to people who you realized just said incredibly stupid things. And you came to, maybe you didn't recognize it first, and then you came to realize these are incredibly stupid things they believe in. And that was the case with Israel, with Judah, well, Israel too, but Judah following these false gods and people, and not realizing, and the Lord is saying, you're following people who are teaching you stupid things. Let it go. And one of the things they were teaching them is to seek what you want. Maybe a good example of this, and this is a pretty powerful example. When you ask for something and the Lord does not respond in the way you expected, and you turn around and say, there is no God. God doesn't hear my prayer. He's not listening to me because he didn't give you what you expected. Well, and then you go to the foreign gods, which obviously you don't because no one does that anymore. But then the people of the time go to the foreign gods because the foreign gods, the idols, would give them what they expected. Why? Because they were worshiping themselves. They were projecting their own desires and powers on these other gods, and they were making happen what they wanted. But what they wanted was not necessarily what was good for them. That's the thing. It's again, let's go out to that whole idea. When you pray, for example, if you pray for prosperity, the Bible talks about the Lord wants people to be prosperous, but he doesn't want people to be rich as all get out. As I always say, I know I bring this up too much, it is not the will of God that we live the poster, if you can look up on the internet, Justification for Higher Education, which is this mansion on the water and a 5-car garage with all these six-figure cars. No, that is not the Lord's will. But he does will, as we see from, even though obviously he didn't know Jesus, the ancient teaching of Aristotle, he does will that you don't live in the extremes, you live in the means. He does will that you live a life where you're adequately able to support yourself. That's what the Lord wants. And the Lord says, if you can't support yourself, I can help you to try to support yourself. But the response the Lord is going to give is not going to be, you're not going to end up, again, justification for higher education. So we look at that. We see that understanding that the Lord is saying, I will take care of you. But when the people are responding to idols, the idols are giving us what we want. Yeah, because you're projecting your own desires on the people, on the false gods you worship, and you're actually expecting the gods to give you your own desires, which, by the way, they will, and those desires will destroy you. So the Lord is saying, I'm going to destroy, trust me, I'm going to destroy those idols, so don't come worshiping them. And he's calling Judah to repentance. We'll be back on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Subscribe, like, pass the word. We'll be right back right after this. Have you ever wanted to read the Bible but didn't know which readings to check out? Well, how about looking at the Church's daily readings? You can find them at the website of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Just go to bible.usccb.org and click on the date that pops up on that page. There are other options on that page as well. That is bible.usccb.org, and click on the date and you will see the daily readings for your own prayer and study of the Bible. This is a prayerful tip from St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer, previews of upcoming podcasts, previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com, your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. And so we're talking about this powerful reality of understanding why God does what he does, because God is ultimately all wisdom. And we want to submit ourselves to that wisdom, because when we submit ourselves to that wisdom, we become docile to the grace of the Lord, and we become docile to that powerful wisdom that guides us. And when the people say, no, we're going to go our own direction, we're going to follow our own way, we're going to do our own thing, then we have the issue that we need to understand that doesn't work. And that is that whole issue of idolatry. And you don't want to be part of that, but you want to also pursue greater wisdom in everything that you do. So that's why we want to be people of prayer. That's why we want to be people who seek to do the right thing. That's why we want to people who do what the Lord says. And that's why we want to be people who really seek to inform of ourselves a deeper understanding of what is there. We want to read good knowledge. We want to study good understanding, because it develops our deeper understanding of who we truly are. And that's why it's so important that we are people of faith, because if you think of it this way, one of the things we do as people of faith is we have an understanding of the way the world works, and then we understand it with that which cannot be seen, which is what our faith is all about. So we have a larger understanding of the way the world works. That's the reason why, by the way, I consider atheism flat earth thinking, because it's based on the idea of this is what I see, therefore this is what exists. That's flat earth thinking. That's why people believe the earth was flat. I see it looks like the earth is flat, therefore the earth is flat. because it's based on your perception. But what the Lord is saying, no, I will teach you more than you can figure out on your own because your perception is limited. So that's why we respond to the Lord. But when you turn around and you say, not anyone necessarily does that who's listening to the show, no, I reject God, I'm going to follow another path, then you're following that which is based on your limited perception. And that becomes a problem. The other side of that is something called angelism. And that is you reject your perception and you only follow what you learn from faith. Well, you reject. So you put like faith and science. Well, a good example would be faith and science. We need to embrace science fully and we need to embrace faith fully. Because when we do that, then we have the bigger picture, the bigger world of what we understand that's going on. If we understand only faith, then we're going to have a limited situation. That's the people who, by the way, are young earth creationists. We're not young earth creationists. And they believe that the earth is only 6,000 years old. And the reason why the reason why dinosaurs existed is that the reason why dinosaur bones existed, I know this particular one is an extreme one, dinosaur bones existed is God put them there to test to make sure we'd still believe. No. The cave people, the ancient pre-Homo sapiens did not ride dinosaurs to work. No, it did work in the Flintstones, but Flintstones is a cartoon. No. We don't believe in young earth creationism. And we believe in embracing all of science, and we believe in embracing all of faith. You know, one of the things to keep in mind is that whole concept of young earth creationism. I mean, I've told you before, Pope Benedict said that it was never the understanding of the fathers of the church that Genesis was I forget the word he uses, but mechanistic account of creation. It was never believed that. It was always that it was a prophecy to give us an understanding of who we are and what our destiny is. So therefore, when you understand that, when you see that basic reality of understanding all of that, then we recognize that it was never the understanding of the church that the earth was 6,000 years old, because that's what the Bible said. It was believed it was 6,000 years old because the Bible said it, because we had no other information, and then we got other information. But it was never understood that this is what the Bible said, this is what is true about the earth, until the Protestant Reformation. Because in the Protestant Reformation, then you have the understanding that all revelation comes from the Bible and all revelation about God. That's the Protestant, that's sola scriptura. The Pope Leo, in his latest encyclical, made it very clear. We seek truth in all these different ways. All these ways lead us to a truth, and when we bring it within the context of faith, we understand the greatest truth. So what we're learning about Mars with the rovers on Mars is powerful, but we don't turn around and say, well, isn't that something that's what God did when he put it there 6,000 years ago? We don't, because we find scientific truth and we add it to our truth in the faith. We don't separate the two. So we're looking at this deeper understanding. So you explore science to its fullest. And what if science disproves God? Can't be done. It cannot be done. Science cannot disprove God. And God is not going to disprove science. If you have someone who shows to you, and I know there are people that do this, who demonstrates to you, here is God's signature from 6,000 years ago, and that's proof that the earth is 6,000 years ago, that's a lie. That's a lie. So we embrace all this truth, and that's what God is trying to teach the Jews. saying, you're rejecting me. And so what you're actually doing is, as he says many times through the prophets, you're not worshiping gods, you're worshiping handmade statues. That's all they are. They're handmade statues. They have no power. I have power because God is the source of all that is wisdom. These false gods are not. But what they are is projections. And therefore, projection is, if you don't know, that's a psychological term. It's like if I don't know. I'm from Boston. I don't like the Yankees. Okay. We'll just say hypothetically, I have nothing against the Yankees per se, but we'll say I'm from Boston and, the Yankees. One of the things I've said about the Pope, he's a wonderful guy, but he's not a Red Sox fan. He's a White Sox fan. So say, for example, well, instead of acknowledging that I have a problem with hating people who love the Yankees, which actually I don't, who love the Yankees, I just go, I don't like those people. And I'm projecting on them my own prejudice and my own reality and says, well, they're those kind of people. Well, they aren't those kind of people, but I'm projecting my thoughts of taking my own weaknesses and projecting it on them. The things I don't like about me, I'm projecting on them because they're Yankees fans. That's what projection is. So what's happening is people take their desires and their hatreds and everything else, and they subconsciously project all this onto the idols, and the idols act and they follow what the idols say. But as they listen to the idols, they also can become the way they want to be, because they're just worshiping themselves. And the Lord is saying, no, I can't allow this. This has to go. I have to get rid of this. This has to stop now. And that's what the Lord is saying. So, and because then when we stop and we listen to the Lord, we're listening to someone who is what I love in Spanish, Messiah, out there. He is beyond us. He is above nature. He is... He is transcendent, and he's immanent. He's above nature, and he's within us. But we see that's that power of the Lord, and this is what he's trying to teach. You've got to turn from worshiping your idols, because he's not going to say this because they wouldn't understand it. All you're doing is projection. God is giving the truth, and God is saying, I will you make your choice to follow me or not, because I'm going to destroy your false gods. We're going to be back on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We're here every single Monday through Friday. Tune us in, spread the word, subscribe, and like and comment.
Did you know that Catholic TV offers free apps for both Android and iOS users? Visit the website catholictv.com or your app store to download this faith resource to your device.
Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. Well, tomorrow we're going to be in the 26th chapter of Isaiah. So that's going to be an interesting, because you do realize Isaiah is a huge book. The first 39 chapters, as I've told you, we actually believe was written by Isaiah the prophet. The next section, there's 3 sections. The next section we believe was maybe written by a disciple of Isaiah. And the third section, I think we still haven't figured out who wrote the third section. And how do you do that? Well, you look at the writing changes, the style of writing, the syntax, the grammar, everything, the style of writing changes. And that's how you know, well, this is obviously a different author, and timing and everything else. We're going to be back tomorrow anyway. Have yourself a blessed day, and we will see you then. Subscribe.
Yeah. You know the real is back. Father Carr Chaplain from the city of champions, dropping daily reflections coming straight from the field. The raw truth revealed for the strong-willed. It's the Greatest Act of Defiance podcast with your host Father Carr, a message built to last. The Greatest Act of Defiance podcast. That's right, the Greatest Act of Defiance. Word up. Word up.
The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.